From KGW News, this is Straight Talk with Laurel Porter.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us for Straight Talk. I'm Laurel Porter. Congress is in recess, but there has been no shortage of drama on Capitol Hill. President Trump's response to the violence in Charlottesville, Virginia, has drawn criticism from many congressional members, including Oregon's delegation. Congressman Kurt Schrader said there is no place in this country for the hate and racism we saw last weekend. The congressman is here tonight to discuss the president and his efforts to move the country forward on health care. And later in the show, Portland City Commissioner Nick Fish sits down with us to tell us about his battle with abdominal cancer. And he has a powerful message. First, welcome to my guest tonight, Oregon 5th District Congressman Kurt Schrader. Thank you for joining us here on Straight Talk, Congressman.
Thanks, Laurel. Always great.
Nice to have you back. Well, it's been a week now since the deadly violence in Charlottesville, Virginia at the rally of white nationals, and it's still a flashpoint of emotions and outrage across the country. And to recap, police say a 20-year-old Ohio man described as a Nazi sympathizer rammed a car into a group of counter-protesters, killing 32-year-old Heather Heyer and injuring many more. What are your thoughts about what happened?
I mean, it's horrible. At this point in our country's history, the 21st century, I grew up during the civil rights movements, and I think we're going backwards like this, that the president gives tacit agreement to these groups, flip-flops on whether or not they're really bad people. That's a horrible, horrible thing for the country to see, and frankly for other countries to see. What has happened to the moral stewardship of this country?
Let's dive into the criticism of President Trump's remarks for a moment. At first, he blamed what he called many sides for their role in the incident, notably reluctant to pinpoint blame on the white supremacists involved. By Monday, he directly condemned the KKK, the neo-Nazis, and white supremacists. But by Tuesday, he again blamed both sides for the violence and defended his initial response and seemed to defend the white supremacist groups. Let's listen to his comments on Tuesday from the lobby of Trump Tower.
All right.
Okay, what about the alt-left that came charging at him? Excuse me. What about the alt-left that came charging at the, as you say, the alt-right? Do they have any semblance of guilt?
Let
me ask you this. What about the fact they came charging with clubs in their hands, swinging clubs? Do they have any problem? I think they do. So, you know, as far as I'm concerned, that was a horrible, horrible day. Wait a minute. I'm not finished. I'm not finished, fake news. That was a horrible day.
You know, some members of Congress, including Congressman Blumenauer, are now calling for a resolution of censure of the president for those remarks. Will you join in that call?
Well, that's been a recent development, the last 24 or 36 hours, and I will be joining in that call. I mean, in the Congress, if we do something like what he did, our words are taken down and we are liable for censure. If we go to something such an egregious, horrifying statement impugning people, and I think this qualifies for that. So.
And what does censure mean? What will be the result of that?
He still will stay in office, but if it does get enough votes, it'll be an official sanction of his actions by the United States Congress that we in no way agree that this is an appropriate behavior of the President of the United States of America.
And you've decided to sign on to that?
I have.
We're taping this on Friday, and we learned today that White House Chief Strategist Steve Bannon is out. Bannon, former head of Breitbart News, described as right-wing nationalist, helped propel Donald Trump into the White House. You have been no fan. You've talked about that here on Straight Talk. How much difference do you think it's going to make with him being out as chief strategist? Will it change the tone in the White House, do you think?
Well, it might change the tone in the White House. I don't know if it changes the tone of the president. I mean, if you see the clips of John Kelly when the president goes off on Tuesday on his reaffirmation that white supremacists are not to really blame for this by themselves and neo-Nazism is essentially okay in this country, I think Mr. Kelly has his hands full, and I think that's why he took out Bannon. I mean, to try and surround the president with people that are hopefully calmer, more studious people that reflect what the American people want to see, which is stability in the White House.
Lot going on with health care. You're right in the middle of it. We'll start with a bill that you introduced to lower drug costs. A bill was sponsored, a bipartisan support. It won in the House and Senate, passed unanimously, and as we understand it, it's on the president's president's desk. He's expected to sign it
Yep.
into law this weekend. And this was all in response to Martin Shkreli's 5,000% drug hike on Daraprim, that bill that went from
Right.
it was a $13.50 a pill, and it went to $750
That's ridiculous.
overnight. So tell us how your bill is going to bring down the cost of drugs.
Well, it does it through competition, the old American way. The only reason this guy was able to make this play, invest a bunch of money to buy this company, is there were no competitors and no prospect of any competitors. He's just out there to rip off families and children going to school. Same thing with the EpiPen folks. They're just as guilty. This became a cascade of events. And so a Republican buddy of mine, Gus Bilrakis from Florida, joined me to put out this bill that basically creates a fast track in the Food and Drug Administration to get competitors to marketplace. So it'll take all the incentive out of it for these hedge fund managers that want to get in there just to make a buck on the backs of our kids.
And you're working in the House on a bipartisan health care plan through the Problem Solvers Caucus. You've been out there in front. What kind of response is it getting? Are you hopeful that this is going to have some traction?
It's getting some good response. Our leaderships were leery of this. They continue to want to play politics. I said enough. Listening to what both Republicans and Democrats were saying, it was clear that generally, frankly, the Affordable Care Act is working very well, except in this individual marketplace. It's only 7 or 8% of the health care delivery, but an important one for those individuals that don't have employer-based insurance, not on Oregon Health Plan, and don't have Medicare. So I said, well, let's go after that. And I got a bunch of Democrats on board, because we're not all in one house either. You know, we have a lot of different philosophies. And I went to the Problem Solvers that I helped found, 4 years ago, got them engaged. We worked real hard. And frankly, at the end of the day, this group is about 20 plus Republicans, 20 plus Democrats. Got over 75%, nearly all of the members to sign on to this as a bipartisan solution to solve that uncertainty in the individual marketplace that we've got to fix by October and November, or that part of the marketplace implodes. So I think there's a lot of incentive to go forward on this.
You're on the House Energy and Commerce Committee, and our lone Republican, Greg Walden, is the chair of that committee. Is he on board with this?
I think he's inclined. Greg's in a tough spot, because his party's all about repeal. But I point out to he and others, we're not getting into that discussion. What we are trying to get at is that there is a place for this individual marketplace, and it's got to be solid. Otherwise, the insurance companies leave. They had stuff in their bill about it. The Democrats and the original ACA had stuff to make sure that market was shoring up. So I think there's going to be some good bipartisan efforts. We're seeing it already on the Senate side. Lamar Alexander is having hearings on the individual marketplace. Patty Murray. So I'm trying to make sure that that same thing happens on the House side. Hopefully we marry those things up in September. There's certainty in the marketplace. People can get the health care they deserve.
Some of your colleagues, including Congressman Blumenauer, Congresswoman Bonamici, and Congressman DeFazio, and a number of other Democrats are backing this H.R. 676 bill for a single-payer system, Medicare for all. You're not a big fan of the system. Why not?
Well, I'm okay with the system, but it's a little premature. We're having trouble keeping the Affordable Care Act on the table. And I point out to folks that while in Oregon, we think health care is a right, I think every member of the delegation feels that way. I remind them some states, maybe 13, 15 states, did not sign on to the Medicaid expansion. In a lot of America, health care is still considered a privilege. And that's a big obstruction we've got to overcome before we get into the single payer type of system.
Let's talk about DACA for a moment. You tweeted about it this week in support of it. This week marked the 5th anniversary of the Obama-era program called Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA. Demonstrators rallied Tuesday at Trump Tower and at the White House in support of DACA, which temporarily protects some people from deportation, specifically those who came to the U.S. as children but do not have legal status. You signed on to a letter to President Trump. What do you think is going to happen with the DACA participants under this administration?
Well, I'm hopeful. Actually, this is one of the areas the president has been fairly consistent on, making sure that these young people that came to this country through no fault of their own, but have basically grown up and lived here and frankly consider this their home country, continue to stay here, continue to grow and develop and become contributing members of our great country. And he's so far been okay with that. Our letter is to hopefully I encourage him to reaffirm that faith going forward. I've signed on to some bills with Luis Gutierrez from Illinois, trying to make sure that the DACA recipients are protected. And there's a new path, maybe a blue card for agricultural workers. It's not all about the high-tech guys where the president seems to be focused. There are a lot of lesser skilled jobs that need to be filled in this country in agriculture, manufacturing, hospitality, construction. Labor guys like it, business guys like it, faith-based organizations like it. I think there's room for all.
We only have less than a minute left, but I want to touch on the veterans bills that you've been working on, a couple of bills that have Oregon ties. Can you briefly tell us about those? Sure.
Well, I mean, the veterans are a nice part of bipartisanship in Congress. This caregiver program, guys were getting kicked off at a much higher rate. That was unacceptable. Our office got the Veterans Affairs Department to stop that. It's being reinstituted, much fairer, trying to make sure people, if they go overseas and serve their country, they don't get their homes foreclosed on. And if they get involuntarily recalled to service, they don't have to pay the government to do that. The government's making them do it. So we're working hard for veterans, and veterans should know that Congress has their back.
Just a few seconds, but I have to ask you about the eclipse, big eclipse weekend. The eclipse on Monday, where will you be?
I'll probably be home, or maybe on the road between Canby and Malala.
Hopefully not stuck in traffic.
Hopefully not stuck in traffic. That's the main thing. I got my glasses, though.
Great. Hopefully they're the safe kind, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Congressman Schrader, thank you for joining us here on Straight Talk. Always nice to have you here.
Thanks, Laurel.
Good luck back in D.C. And coming up next, Portland City Commissioner Nick Fish shares the difficult news. He's battling abdominal cancer. He sat down with us for an exclusive interview. Hear his inspiring message of courage after the break.